The sky burned with fire. No one could remember a time when Earth had ever felt this vulnerable. The Zerkal invasion was swift and brutal, with no warning, no negotiation. Within days of their arrival, Earth's defenses crumbled. The aliens, towering and mechanical, their ships glistening with the cold efficiency of conquest, descended upon Earth's cities like locusts. Their technology was incomprehensible to human eyes, weapons of unimaginable power tearing through military strongholds and government buildings with a single blast. Captain Alina Hayes stood in the remains of a ruined military command center in what was once Washington, D.C., her face grim as she scanned the reports from her squadron. A few scattered resistance cells were putting up a fight, but for every small victory, there were 100 defeats. The alien warships hovered ominously in the atmosphere, their presence like a constant shadow looming over the shattered world. Alina clenched her fists, glaring at the digital map in front of her. The aliens weren't just here to conquer. They were here to obliterate any trace of humanity's existence. Earth had already lost its largest cities, and its military power had been rendered obsolete. The resistance, though growing, was fragmented. There was no unified force, no grand strategy to counter the attack. It seemed, in every conceivable way, that humanity was doomed. "Captain, we've lost contact with our eastern forces. The Zerkal hit them hard," Lieutenant Sarah Cole reported, her voice low, tinged with disbelief. Alina didn't respond immediately. The weight of the news was crushing, but she couldn't afford to show weakness. The resistance needed leadership now more than ever. The destruction of New York and London had been the tipping point. Millions had perished in the blink of an eye, and those left behind were scrambling, trying to reorganize in the chaos. "We can't give up. We're not finished yet," Alina finally said, her voice steely with resolve. She turned to Dr. Jackson Miller, the team's alien tech expert, who was hunched over a series of alien devices that had been scavenged from downed ships. Dr. Miller looked up, his face pale but determined. "Captain, we may not have the firepower to go toe-to-toe with them, but we do have something they didn't account for: our adaptability. I've been studying their technology. It's not perfect, and there's a flaw, a vulnerability in their communication system. If we can exploit that, we might stand a chance at striking back." Alina's mind raced. She wasn't sure how much of a chance it was, but it was a chance. And at this point, any chance was worth taking. "How long until you have something we can use?" Miller didn't hesitate. "A few days, maybe less. But we'll need a team to infiltrate their command base. If we can plant a virus into their central system, it will disrupt their command structure long enough for us to organize a real resistance." The implications were massive, but so was the risk. Infiltrating the heart of the alien forces was a suicide mission. The Zerkal's command centers were located in heavily fortified areas, and their surveillance systems were advanced beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. But Alina's resolve hardened. If there was even a small chance, it was worth the gamble. "We'll need a squad. Volunteers, skilled and willing to risk everything." "I'll lead the mission," she said, standing taller. "Miller, you'll be with us. We'll take this fight to them." The resistance, small but growing, had a new rallying cry: "We fight. We win." Humanity's will was not so easily broken, even in the face of extinction. The plan was risky, arguably insane. But for Alina, it was their only hope. As the world collapsed around them, the small resistance cell she led gathered its resources in secret bunkers and hidden safe houses. The clock was ticking, and the Zerkal Empire was not going to give them any time to prepare. Still, the glimmer of hope that Dr. Miller had provided, his discovery of the aliens' communication vulnerability, offered something humanity hadn't had in days: a target. "We have one shot at this," Alina said, pacing in the dimly lit command center. The walls were lined with outdated maps of cities and military zones, repurposed for resistance planning. "If we fail, it's over. The last of our defenses will crumble, and we won't get another chance." Her team, A mixture of seasoned soldiers and young volunteers sat in front of holographic displays, listening intently. They had all witnessed the devastation, felt the despair that hung in the air like a toxic cloud. But now, the resistance was not just surviving. They were fighting back. Will hit a communications relay center deep in their territory. Alina continued, her voice steady. It's guarded, heavily fortified, but Miller believes if we can infiltrate and inject the virus into their system, it'll cripple their command for at least 24 hours. That's our window. Dr. Miller was standing by the main console, surrounded by alien technology, his face illuminated by the flickering screens. I've been able to reverse engineer a basic entry protocol, but we won't have much time once we breach their security. The virus will only buy us so much time before they realize what we've done. We need to get in and out quickly. Alina nodded. We're counting on you. The rest of us will make sure you have the distraction you need. The squad's faces were a mixture of determination and apprehension. Everyone in the room understood the stakes. They were preparing to infiltrate an alien stronghold where success meant survival and failure meant annihilation. The following night, the team moved under the cover of darkness. They were a small group, but their mission was of critical importance. Alina's squad had undergone extensive training for covert operations, and despite the terrifying odds, they moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. They reached the outskirts of the alien stronghold by dawn, a sprawling facility built into the side of a mountain, protected by a near-impenetrable force field. The Zerkel soldiers, tall and intimidating, patrolled the perimeter with relentless efficiency. Their weaponry was a terrifying blend of energy shields and plasma rifles that could disintegrate anything in its path. Alina, Sarah Cole, one of the team's sharpshooters, whispered into the comms. We got eyes on 2 guards patrolling the access point. Should I take them out? Alina's eyes narrowed as she analyzed the situation. Negative. We need to avoid detection at all costs. We're here to plant the virus, not start a firefight. Wait for my signal. Time seemed to slow as they inched closer, using the natural cover of the rocky terrain. Every step was calculated, every breath shallow. One mistake, one sound, and the entire mission could go south in seconds. Alina kept her focus sharp, eyes darting to the alien surveillance drones that occasionally zipped overhead, their red lights scanning for any sign of human presence. Now Alina breathed, and in an instant they moved. Using cloaking technology scavenged from an alien ship, they crossed the final stretch of open ground. The access point was a security door, guarded by 2 Zerkel sentries. It was their only chance. Dr. Miller was quick, his hand steady despite the pressure. He connected a makeshift device to the control panel, the small screen flickering as the virus began to upload. The seconds felt like an eternity. Alina, the virus is in. We've got 20 minutes before they detect the breach, Miller said, his voice tight but confident. Time to move now. Alina ordered. The team sprinted to a secondary exit, hoping to slip through unnoticed. Just as they reached the door, an alarm blared, loud, unmistakable. The Zerkel had detected the intrusion. Run, Alina shouted. The sound of heavy boots pounding the ground echoed through the facility as alien soldiers charged toward their location. The team broke into a sprint, their adrenaline pumping, but the countdown was already ticking. They had 20 minutes to get back to their extraction point, but now, every second felt like a lifetime. The chase began. Alina's heart pounded in her chest as they weaved through the facility's narrow corridors. The team was forced to fire back at advancing aliens, but they didn't stop to engage in a fight. They needed to get out, and fast. Just as they reached the final stretch toward their extraction point, an explosion rocked the corridor. A secondary explosion triggered by a Zerkel booby trap sealed off the path, cutting off their exit. Alina swore under her breath. They were trapped. Another way out. Now, Alina barked. The team immediately changed course, following Miller's lead as he hacked into another system, rerouting the exit. A door slid open just as the first wave of Zirkel soldiers appeared. Alina and her team rushed through, the sound of blaster fire and alien roars ringing in their ears. They were so close. The extraction ship hovered just beyond the facility's perimeter, ready to take them back to the safety of the Resistance base. But as the team sprinted toward it, the sky above them lit up with blinding energy blasts. The aliens had launched their final counterattack, but they were too late. The humans had already made their mark. The days following their successful strike were filled with a new kind of energy. For the first time since the invasion began, the human resistance felt they had an advantage, however small. The virus that had been planted into the Zirkel's central command system had caused significant disruption, and the invaders were reeling from the unexpected chaos. Their once unshakable command structure had faltered, and for a brief moment, humanity had the upper hand. Captain Alina Hayes stood before the growing assembly of soldiers and civilians that now made up the core of the resistance. The once fragmented groups of survivors were beginning to unite under a single banner, drawn together by the realization that they could fight back. They were no longer just hiding from the inevitable. They were actively resisting the invaders. The mood in the resistance camps had shifted. People who had previously been overwhelmed by despair were now filled with a fierce determination. Every victory, no matter how small, had started to form the foundation of something larger. Alina knew that they could no longer afford to remain a scattered force. They needed to become an army. "We've given them a taste of what humanity can do," Alina said, addressing her growing army. "But this is just the beginning. We need to keep hitting them where it hurts. Hit them hard and fast before they can recover." Her voice rang out across the camp, filled with a quiet intensity that inspired confidence in those listening. The resistance fighters, now clad in makeshift armor and armed with alien weaponry they had scavenged, responded with eager nods. They understood the gravity of the situation. "We'll target their supply lines next. If we can disrupt their logistics, we can starve them out and buy ourselves more time." "Time to plan our next big move," Alina continued, her strategic mind working quickly. Meanwhile, Dr. Jackson Miller was working around the clock with his team of scientists and engineers. The data they had gathered from the alien systems was invaluable, and the ability to reverse engineer the technology had given them an unexpected edge. With their knowledge of alien technology growing by the day, the humans were beginning to adapt and modify it for their own use. They had already managed to turn a few alien energy weapons against the invaders and rig their own drones to intercept Zirkel signals. Miller met with Alina after the briefing, his face a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. "I've made progress. We've cracked their communication codes. The Zirkel use a frequency to communicate, but we found a way to jam it. If we can disrupt that frequency across their entire network, we can cause confusion and disable their coordination on a planetary scale. It's a risky move, but it'll give us a huge advantage." Alina nodded, already formulating her next steps. "Can we do it? And how soon?" "We need a transmitter capable of broadcasting the jamming signal. It'll take time to build, but we can have it ready in a week, maybe less." "A week?" Alina muttered, her mind racing. A week was enough time to make a real difference, but the Zirkel were not a force to be underestimated. They would regroup, they would retaliate. It was a race against time. Elsewhere, resistance cells around the globe were rallying to the cause. From the ruins of Paris to the hidden bases in the mountains of South America, groups of civilians, soldiers, and even former engineers had joined the effort, each one contributing in unique ways. While the majority of humanity was still recovering from the devastation, these resistance cells had become the backbone of Earth's resurgence. Each victory, no matter how small, was proof that humanity could still fight. In Eastern Europe, a newly formed task force managed to secure an important fuel depot from the Zirkel, ensuring that the resistance would have the resources needed to keep fighting. In Asia, guerrilla fighters attacked and disabled key supply routes, and in Africa, the resistance captured an alien vessel, stripping it for parts to craft weapons of their own. As the Resistance's victories multiplied, the alien invaders began to realize they were facing a far more formidable foe than they had anticipated. But the stakes were rising. With each success, the Zerkal's counterattacks became more brutal. They had underestimated the human will to fight. And now, every inch of ground taken by the Resistance was paid for with blood. The aliens launched a devastating strike against a major human stronghold in North America, wiping out entire Resistance cells in a single brutal assault. News of the attack spread like wildfire through the underground networks. The survivors, those who managed to escape the carnage, were filled with grief and rage, but they also felt something else: the fire of revenge. Elena was among the first to hear about the attack. She paced across the command center, her face a mask of stoic fury. "This ends now," she muttered to herself. As Miller entered the room, she turned to him. "We've waited long enough. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting to take our planet back. The Zerkal can destroy our cities, our homes, but they cannot break our will." Miller, though exhausted, looked up with resolve in his eyes. "And we'll make sure they know it. The next strike will be decisive." The brief glimmer of victory was quickly extinguished as the Zerkal launched their retaliatory strike. In one fell swoop, they demonstrated just how ruthless and relentless they could be. Within hours, cities that had been marked as human strongholds were obliterated, turned into smoldering ruins by orbital bombardments. The sheer devastation shook the very soul of the Resistance. In the aftermath, silence hung over the global network of survivors. News of the coordinated alien counteroffensive spread rapidly. New York, Paris, Tokyo, and other major cities had been reduced to ash. Millions were lost, and the survivors were left to pick up the broken pieces of what was once the pride of humanity. The Zerkal had demonstrated their ability to not only conquer but erase everything in their path. Elena stood before a holographic map of Earth, watching as the alien forces wiped out entire regions with brutal efficiency. She felt the weight of the devastation pressing on her chest. Every marker of human survival was now surrounded by the cold red dots of Zerkal activity. The Resistance's heart had been dealt a blow it had never anticipated. "Is this it?" Lieutenant Sarah Cole asked, her voice quiet as she stared at the map. "Have we lost?" Elena didn't respond immediately. The question echoed through her mind as well. The humans had fought back, had succeeded in disrupting the alien command structure, but at what cost? The alien counteroffensive had proven that the invaders were capable of far more destruction than humanity had imagined. "I'm not giving up," Elena finally said, her voice a low growl of defiance. "And neither should any of you." Dr. Miller entered the command center, looking grim but determined. "The Zerkal aren't just trying to crush our forces. They are trying to break our spirit. They think this will be the end of us." Elena met his eyes. "Well, they're wrong. I won't let them destroy what we've built. We've come too far. Too many good people have died for us to back down now." "But they've taken everything," Miller pointed out. "Every major city, every key resistance cell we had gone. We're running out of time." "No," Elena said, shaking her head. "They've taken our cities. They've taken our homes, but they haven't taken our will to fight. If they want to break us, they'll have to do it the hard way." The Zerkal's destructive tactics, though overwhelming, also sparked a change in the remaining humans. The brutal assaults, the utter annihilation of their strongest positions, did something to the survivors. It forged a unity among them that had never existed before. The world, though fractured, now had a common enemy. And if the Zerkal thought they could break humanity by terrorizing them, they were mistaken. The human spirit wasn't so easily crushed. Across the world, pockets of survivors began to regroup, and the resistance became even more determined. The scale of the alien attack left the population in ruins, but the fires of rebellion were stoked. People who had never fired a weapon before were now joining the fight. Even civilians, those who had once cowered in the shadows, were stepping forward, contributing in any way they could, engineering weapons, salvaging supplies, creating new ways to strike back. In Eastern Europe, resistance fighters had successfully held a key region, and though the Zerkal attempted to wipe them out with another bombardment, they remained unbroken, digging in and fortifying their position. In South America, a new underground rail system was established to move people and supplies between hidden bases. No longer was the resistance simply reacting to the alien onslaught. They were adapting, evolving, and finding ways to strike back. But even as this unity grew, the counterattacks from the Zerkal only became more ferocious. Every successful mission the humans undertook was met with a devastating response. The invaders sent wave after wave of heavily armed soldiers to reinforce their front lines, flooding the planet with more advanced war machines and more relentless tactics. As the resistance's numbers swelled, so too did the complexity of their missions. Alina's team was no longer just trying to survive. They were striking back. They launched coordinated sabotage operations across alien supply lines, attacking the enemy's supply routes and communication centers whenever they could. It wasn't enough to win the war yet, but they were learning how to fight back in a way that made the Zerkal wary of underestimating humanity. But then came the final blow. A planetary assault of unimaginable scale. In retaliation for their continued resistance, the Zerkal unleashed their ultimate weapon. A massive orbital bombardment, designed to destroy entire continents. The sheer magnitude of the attack was beyond anything the world had prepared for. The first wave hit South America. A city-sized blast crater replaced what had once been a thriving metropolis, and before the resistance could react, the aliens dropped massive energy bombs that tore through entire ecosystems. The Earth itself seemed to buckle under the force, with shockwaves that radiated out, flattening forests, mountains, and cities alike. It was as if the aliens had decided to erase humanity's very presence on Earth. Alina. Miller's voice crackled over the comms. They're hitting us everywhere. The technology they're using, it's beyond anything we can defend against. Alina's heart sank as she watched the reports flood in. We need to hit them before they can fire again, she said, her voice laced with a cold fury. If we don't stop them, we'll lose everything. We'll lose Earth. The alien retaliation, savage and swift, had brought humanity to the brink. But despite the devastation, despite the overwhelming odds, Alina knew one thing. They hadn't lost. Not yet, and they weren't going down without a fight. The battle for Earth had reached its darkest hour, but the spark of resistance had ignited across the world. And this time, the humans wouldn't be fighting to survive. They would be fighting to win. The air felt heavy with despair, but beneath the surface, there was a growing determination. Earth was on the edge of extinction, but humanity was refusing to go quietly into the night. Alina stood before her team in a makeshift command center deep underground, far from the destruction above. The walls were lined with scavenged alien tech, screens flickering with maps, intelligence reports, and desperate communications from remaining resistance cells. Outside, the world burned. The Zerkal think they've won, Alina began, her voice steady, though her heart pounded with the weight of everything they had lost. They think they can wipe us out, erase our presence from this planet. But they're wrong. We're still here, and we're going to show them just how wrong they are. The faces in the room were weary, bruised, and bloodied, but there was fire in their eyes. The latest alien bombardments had torn through continents, leaving a scar on Earth that would take centuries to heal. Millions were gone, but the rest were determined to fight. Dr. Miller was hunched over a console, his fingers dancing across alien systems he had long since mastered. I've been working nonstop, trying to find a way to turn the tables on their orbital weapons. I'm not sure how much time we have left, but if we're going to hit them, we need to take out their command ship. They're coordinating the strikes from up there. Alina's brow furrowed. The flagship. The Zerkal flagship is where they control everything. Their orbital bombardment system. Their command structure, their fleet, Miller confirmed. If we can disable or destroy it, they'll lose their ability to launch any more of those planet-wide attacks. Alina nodded. It was a dangerous idea, one that had the potential to fail catastrophically. The flagship was not just a ship, it was a fortress in space. But it was their best shot at ending this war once and for all. Do we have a plan to get there? Alina asked, turning to her team. We've been tracking a weakness in their fleet, Sarah Cole, the sharp-eyed sniper said, adjusting her weapon. There's a gap in their patrols, an opening we can exploit. It won't be easy, but I believe we can get a small strike team aboard their ship. We won't have long before they realize we're there, but we'll have enough time to plant a virus in their systems, just like we did before. We can't do it alone, Alina said, her voice firm. We need all hands on deck. Let's call for reinforcements from every resistance cell left. This is no longer just a battle for survival. This is a battle for the future of Earth. Across the globe, the call to arms was heard. Resistance cells, once scattered and fractured, began to rally under a unified banner. Volunteers poured into secret bunkers, military bases, and hidden outposts, ready to join the strike. Fighters, engineers, scientists, and civilians all contributed to the mission with everything they had left. Humanity had reached its breaking point, and now they would push back with everything they could muster. In the next few days, preparations moved at a frenzied pace. The plan was simple but risky. Infiltrate the Zerkel flagship, disable its orbital bombardment system, and ensure it could no longer launch strikes on Earth. The goal wasn't just to survive, it was to cripple the alien invaders' ability to decimate the planet. Alina stood in the command center as the final details were hashed out, watching as her people worked tirelessly to prepare the attack. They were making makeshift weapons, modifying their ships, and adapting whatever alien technology they had to create a strike force capable of taking on the flagship. This is it, Alina said quietly to herself. She was preparing for the mission of a lifetime, the most dangerous, high-stakes mission she had ever led. This is how we win. The night before the mission, Alina took a moment to reflect. The weight of the world rested on the shoulders of her team, but she knew they were ready. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity had something that the Zerkel could never replicate: the drive to survive, to adapt, and to fight back. It was a force that could not be easily crushed, no matter how advanced their enemies were. She gathered her team for the final briefing. Sarah Cole, the sharpshooter, was ready to take out key targets and clear the way for the virus upload. Dr. Miller, along with a handful of his colleagues, would work to access the alien systems once inside, and Alina, as always, would lead the charge. We're going to hit them hard, and we're going to hit them fast, Alina said, her voice unwavering. We make it aboard that ship, we get the virus in, and we leave no trace. If we succeed, the war changes. If we fail, we don't have a second chance. So remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for Earth. There were no words after that. No cheers, no speeches. Just the steely resolve of a group of people who understood that they were on the brink of everything. There would be no retreat, no surrender, just one last, desperate attempt to save their world. The mission was set in motion. The strike team launched into the dark abyss of space, headed directly for the Zerkel flagship. Every passing moment felt like an eternity. But with each second, the weight of the universe seemed to lift from their shoulders. There was hope, fragile and fleeting, but it was enough to push them forward. Humanity's first true counterstrike was about to begin. And with it, the fight for Earth. The black void of space was an unsettling sight. It was silent, cold, and endless. But within that void, a small fleet of human ships, modified with alien technology, moved forward like shadows, their course set directly toward the heart of the Zerkel war machine, their flagship. Alina sat at the helm of the lead ship, her hands steady on the controls. The rest of the strike team was dispersed across the fleet, each individual deep in their own thoughts. This was the final gamble. If they failed, Earth would fall. and humanity's resistance would become nothing more than a memory. There would be no second chances, but if they succeeded, the tides of war could shift forever. Elena. Sarah Cole's voice came through the comms, steady and reassuring. We're in position, ready to breach the flagship's outer perimeter. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the mission on her shoulders. Acknowledged Sarah. Let's move. The fleet, made up of makeshift ships and alien tech-modified transports, drifted closer toward the massive Zercal flagship. It loomed before them like a monstrous titan, its sleek, armored surface glimmering in the distant light of a nearby star. The flagship was an impenetrable fortress, its weapon systems designed to wipe out any threat with ruthless efficiency. Yet, humanity's makeshift fleet had a secret weapon, the element of surprise. The Zercal weren't expecting a full-on strike, not this soon. As they neared the flagship, the Resistance's lead ship fired a series of rapid bursts at the shield barriers surrounding the alien vessel. The Zercal hadn't detected them yet, but that wouldn't last long. Shields are holding, but not for long. Dr. Miller's voice echoed through Elena's comm. He was stationed aboard the flagship's breach team, ready to access the central command systems once they made their way inside. We're counting on you to get us through. Hang tight. We're almost there, Elena replied, her voice tight with determination. The first barrage of resistance fire hit the flagship's outer shield, causing ripples of energy to flash across its surface. The ship lurched slightly, and Elena could feel the Resistance's craft shaking under the strain, but it was holding together. Now, Sarah, we need that breach. With a coordinated push, Sarah and her sniper team locked onto the flagship's weak points, targeting shield generators and small gaps in the vessel's armor. The sniper's shots rang out, each one creating a small explosion of energy that cracked through the alien ship's outer layer. The flagship's shield began to flicker and wane. We've got an opening, Sarah reported. It won't be long before they realize we're here. Get inside, now. With one final surge, Elena guided the ship directly into the breach. The ship's hull scraped against the Zercal's outer walls, sparks flying as the ship descended through the gap. Inside, the team could already feel the eerie hum of alien technology, its unfamiliar energy vibrating through the ship. Everyone, suit up, Elena ordered. This is it. We've got one shot. Let's make it count. The strike team was now inside the flagship. The ship's interior was vast, sprawling with high-tech corridors and impossible architecture, twisted, alien, and dark. But they had no time to admire the design. They moved quickly, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Elena, Sarah, Miller, and a handful of other specialists sprinted through the maze of the ship, heading toward the central command hub. Every step was a risk. Every corner could hide an ambush, and every second was precious. We're almost at the core, Miller called over comms. Once we reach the control center, we can upload the virus and disable the flagship's weapon systems. We need to hurry. But it wasn't going to be that simple. The Zercal flagship was far more advanced than they had anticipated. The resistance team rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with a squadron of elite alien soldiers, each one wearing advanced battle armor and wielding terrifying energy weapons. The air crackled with tension. Get down, Elena shouted as she dove for cover. Sarah's sniper rifle went off first, a single, well-placed shot that took out one of the alien soldiers in an instant. The remaining soldiers fired back, energy blasts lighting up the dim corridor. The resistance team fought fiercely, using their scavenged alien weapons and human ingenuity to hold their ground. Each shot was calculated, each move deliberate. We can't hold them off forever, one of the soldiers shouted. Miller's voice cut through the chaos. Elena, we need to go now. The systems are too close to our position. Elena's heart raced. This was it. If they didn't push forward, they would never make it to the command center. They had no choice but to fight their way through. With a burst of courage, Elena led the charge, moving past their cover and diving into the fray. Her team followed suit, each one pushing forward, taking out enemy after enemy, until finally they reached the heart of the ship, the control center. The door to the command center opened, and there they were. The central hub of the Zerkel flagship was like nothing they had ever seen. The room hummed with raw, pulsating energy, and alien intelligence that seemed to bend the laws of physics itself. The massive central console was surrounded by complex machinery, far beyond human understanding. Miller and his team went straight to work, plugging into the alien systems with the devices they had modified. "We've got a limited window," Miller said. "Once I upload the virus, it will disable their weapon systems, but it will also trigger a shutdown across their entire fleet. It could send them into complete chaos." "Alina," Sarah called out, watching the door warily. "We don't have much time before they send reinforcements. We need to get out now." Alina nodded, sweat beading on her forehead. They were so close. The future of Earth depended on this moment. "Do it, Miller," Alina said, her voice unwavering. "We either win or we die trying." The virus was uploaded, and the countdown to the flagship's collapse began. But the real fight had only just begun. Reinforcements were coming, and the Resistance was about to face its deadliest challenge yet. The hum of the alien ship's power systems filled the control room like a living heartbeat. Alina stood at the edge of the central console, watching Miller as he worked furiously to complete the virus upload. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the pressure mounted. "Almost there," Miller said, his voice strained. "Just a few more seconds." But just as hope began to flicker, the worst possible news came through. The alarms blared in the corridors outside the command center, the shrill wail signaling that the Zerkel had detected their presence. "They know we're here," Sarah's voice crackled over the comms. "Reinforcements are inbound. This place is about to get swarming." "How much time, Miller?" Alina demanded, her voice sharp. "Less than a minute," Miller replied, his hands flying over the alien tech. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he tried to outpace the countdown. "Once this virus is in, it'll shut down their fleet, but it'll trigger a global system failure. It'll take out everything, their weapons, shields, and the main power grid. Then let's hope it works," Alina muttered under her breath. "Everyone get ready to move." Suddenly, the doors to the control room slid open with a terrifying hiss, and an entire squad of armored Zerkel soldiers stormed in, their weapons raised. The Resistance was out of time. "Fire!" Alina shouted, ducking behind the central console for cover. The Resistance opened fire, using every weapon at their disposal. Sarah's sniper rifle let out a series of precise shots, taking down 2 of the aliens before they even had a chance to react. But there were too many. The soldiers poured into the room, their energy shields crackling as they returned fire. The Resistance fighters fought with everything they had, but the odds were quickly turning against them. "Alina, get out of here," Miller yelled, his fingers still typing frantically. "I'm almost done, but I can't hold them off much longer." Alina exchanged a quick look with Sarah, who was keeping the enemies at bay with precise shots. "We hold them off for as long as we can. Just finish the damn upload, Miller." The battle in the control room intensified. The Zerkel soldiers pushed forward with brutal efficiency, their plasma weapons cutting through the air with deadly accuracy. The humans retaliated with everything they had, but each second felt like a lifetime. Suddenly, the entire room trembled, and a deep rumble echoed through the corridors. The power systems were beginning to flicker. "It's working," Miller yelled, his voice filled with a mix of exhaustion and triumph. "The virus is in. Their systems are going haywire." But just as the words left his mouth, the walls of the control room exploded with a deafening roar. The Zerkel had activated an emergency defense protocol, and the room was filled with blinding light as the ship's security systems kicked into high gear. A massive energy field surged through the room, blasting back the Resistance fighters and sending them sprawling to the floor. "Alina, we need to go now," Sarah shouted, her voice filled with urgency. Elena scrambled to her feet, heart racing. The flagship was falling apart around them. The virus had triggered a chain reaction, and the once impenetrable warship was now a ticking time bomb. "We can't leave until we disable their escape pods," Elena said. "If we don't, the aliens will escape, and this mission will be for nothing." "Are you insane?" Sarah shouted. "We don't have time for that. We need to get out before the whole damned ship goes up." But Elena's mind was made up. They couldn't leave anything to chance. The Zerkal couldn't be allowed to escape. If even one of them made it off the flagship, it could be the end for humanity. "We take them out now," Elena said, her jaw set with determination. "And then we leave." The resistance fought their way through the chaos, battling alien forces at every turn. The corridors of the flagship were a war zone, blasts of energy lighting up the dark halls, the sounds of combat echoing in every direction. They pushed forward, taking out alien soldiers with ruthless precision. When they finally reached the ship's escape pod bay, the doors were locked tight, reinforced with layers of alien steel. But the resistance had something the Zerkal hadn't counted on: human ingenuity. Dr. Miller, working under immense pressure, quickly modified a stolen alien disruptor device to crack the locks. Within seconds, the door to the escape pods was wide open. "Clear," Miller called out, panting heavily. No sign of reinforcements yet. Elena led the charge into the bay, checking each pod to ensure it was disabled. Her eyes scanned the room. No sign of the enemy yet, but the countdown in her mind was ticking. "We're out of time," Sarah said, urgency in her voice. "We need to go. Now." Elena took one last look at the control panel in the bay, ensuring that no pods would escape. She was satisfied that the mission was complete. The Zerkal would not be leaving this ship. "We're clear," Elena said, turning toward the others. "Everyone, to the ship. It's time to get the hell out of here." The resistance team made their way back to their ship, fighting off alien soldiers in their path as the Zerkal flagship began to implode around them. The power systems were failing, the hull was weakening, and soon the entire vessel would be destroyed. The team barely made it back to their ship in time. They blasted off from the flagship just as the massive warship began to disintegrate in a brilliant explosion of light and sound. The shockwave hit their vessel, sending it tumbling through space. But they held on. They were alive. And the battle was far from over. The resistance fleet hurtled through space, barely escaping the eruption of the Zerkal flagship behind them. The shockwave reverberated through the hull of their ship, sending a tremor through their bones. For a moment, all Elena could hear was the deafening roar of the explosion, a sound so intense it felt like it might tear their ship apart. But they had made it. Against all odds, they had survived. "Status report," Elena barked, gripping the controls as the ship steadied itself in the cold void. "We're good for now," Miller replied, his voice strained from the effort of the mission. The flagship's destruction triggered a chain reaction through their fleet. Their weapon systems are offline. The virus worked. But they won't stay down for long. We need to keep moving. Elena nodded, her mind racing. The alien fleet had been thrown into disarray. But this was no time to rest. The battle was far from over. They had crippled the Zerkal's ability to wipe out Earth, but there were still far too many of them, and Earth's survival depended on what came next. The strike team gathered in the cramped, dimly lit command room aboard their ship. The weight of their victory was not lost on them, but neither was the grim reality of the situation. "We've dealt them a serious blow, but they'll regroup," Elena said, her voice low and steady. "We can't afford to give them time. We have to strike back now, while they're vulnerable." "What's our next move?" Sarah asked, leaning forward, her eyes sharp. "We find their command center. If we can take out the leadership, we can cripple their ability to function as an organized force," Elena said, determination in her eyes. "It's our only shot at ending this." Miller glanced at the map on the screen. The Zerkel command ship is in a remote sector of space, heavily guarded, but it's isolated right now. If we make our move quickly enough, we might be able to catch them off guard. This is it, the final assault. Across the globe, the news of the Zerkel flagship's destruction spread like wildfire. The people of Earth, battered and broken from years of relentless war, found new hope. Resistance forces in every corner of the planet rallied behind the news, joining the fight with renewed vigor. The message was clear. Humanity was not going to give up without a fight. In the underground bunkers and makeshift military camps, humans gathered, ready to join the final push. The moment had arrived. Earth was no longer just defending itself. It was preparing to strike back. With the Zerkel leadership vulnerable and their fleet in disarray, the time for a counteroffensive had come. Elena, Sarah, Miller, and the rest of the strike team knew what they had to do. The plan was simple: infiltrate the Zerkel command ship, locate the alien leadership, and eliminate them. With the virus still disabling their fleet, the Resistance would have a window of opportunity. But there was no time to waste. "Everyone's ready," Elena said, gathering her team in the ship's cockpit. "This is it. We take out the leadership, and the war ends today." As the ship engaged its engines, they set their course for the enemy's heart. The journey through space was tense, the quiet hum of the ship almost deafening after the chaos of their previous battle. Each member of the team sat in silence, their thoughts focused on the mission ahead. Hours later, the Resistance fleet arrived at the coordinates. The Zerkel command ship, massive and imposing, loomed ahead, surrounded by a network of smaller ships, clearly the last line of defense. The ship's sleek, dark surface reflected the distant stars, like a predator watching its prey. Elena's voice came over the comms, calm but resolute. "This is it. We breach the ship, take out their leaders, and end this. Once we're inside, we'll split up into teams. Miller, you're with me. Sarah, you take point." The final assault began with a series of precise attacks. The Resistance's ships dove toward the command ship, launching volleys of fire at the outer defenses. The Zerkel, still recovering from their earlier losses, were disoriented, and their counterattacks were sluggish. For the first time in years, it felt as though the humans had the upper hand. "We've got an opening," Sarah shouted, her sniper rifle taking down one of the Zerkel commanders who had appeared on a bridge overlooking the attack. "Elena, we're clear to board." "Let's move," Elena ordered. With the way cleared, the strike team launched their boarding assault. Using alien technology they had scavenged and adapted, the team infiltrated the command ship through a series of hidden access points. They moved swiftly, guided by Miller's expertise in alien systems, until they reached the command center. Inside, the alien leaders were gathered in a tense war council, unaware of the breach. They were discussing their next move, but the humans had come prepared. Elena, Sarah, and the others stormed into the room, weapons raised. "Get down," Elena shouted, her voice sharp and commanding. She and her team opened fire, cutting down the guards around the alien leaders. The Zerkel commanders tried to retaliate, but the humans were too quick. Miller, who had been working on a plan to disable the command center, swiftly inserted a device into the central control panel. Within moments, the ship's power systems began to fail, and the alien leaders were trapped. "Elena," Miller said, his voice tight, "the virus has taken full effect. Their fleet is already in chaos, and their command structure is gone. The leadership is done. Finish them," Elena ordered, stepping forward, her eyes cold as she looked at the remaining Zerkel leaders. With a final, decisive shot, the Resistance ended the Zerkel command. The last of the invaders had fallen, and Earth had won. The battle was over. The humans had proven the invaders wrong in every sense. Earth, against all odds, had triumphed. The Resistance's victory was a testament to human resilience, ingenuity, and the unyielding will to survive. As Elena and her team stood amidst the wreckage of the Zerkal Command Center, they knew that the war was over. Earth had survived, and humanity had emerged victorious.